A very, very good morning to all of you, and welcome to the class of income of other persons included in SSC's total income and set off and carry forward. So, this chapter 4 and chapter 5, which we'll be doing today, one before break and one after break, is sort of I'll not say a direct question comes or may not come, but it's sort of an important chapter. Why? Because it is actually those chapter which complete your computation of total income. So there would be one adjustment or two adjustment which would be impacting here, or maybe an MCQ can come from here. So these chapter, in a way, are a run-through chapter, but are extremely important to complete that whole full-fledged question that comes in your exam. So if you promise that you stay with me in this next coming 2.5 and 3 hours. So we can complete both these chapters, and maybe you might not even need to revise it again, or if you will revise, it would hardly take 15-20 minutes. Okay. So please settle in and then we can start both the chapters. First, we'll do chapter 4. And I hope everyone is doing fine. Do let me know wherever any problem comes, okay? Very good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Lovely to see so many of you active in the morning. Give me a moment. Just beginning, just 1 second. Okay, so this chapter, income of other persons included in SSC's total income, यानी किसी और का income, someone else income is included in the SSC's income. We have to consider ourselves as assessee, and in our income, someone else's income would be included, and then our total income would be computed, and then the tax would be given on it. So you'll be like, ma'am, what? Why is this? Why should I be paying tax on someone else's income? So it is not why you would be paying tax on someone else's income. Income tax, throughout income tax, there are checkpoints. There are checkpoints where the department or the government ensures that the person do not evade tax, and is a person who is a proper compliant person. Compliant person matlab who is doing all what is written in law rightfully and dutifully. Okay. So one such checkpoint is this chapter whereby the department ensures that the person is not diverting his or her income, or does not evading tax through vicious measures. What happens? Many people have a habit who are in high income group to show that the income which they are earning is not their income, but the income of other person who is comparatively in a low income group. How can they do it? Simply, if I suppose Mr. X is there. Okay. Now Mr. X is already already has an income of say 25 lakhs, who's already going into a higher slab of 30%. Any additional income would be charged at the rate of 30%. Now his wife hardly has an income of every interest. So what does he do? Suppose he has to receive rent. He will tell the other person that since the property is mine, no problem, but you deposit the rent in my wife's account. So he's under the impression that when the rent is going under the wife's account, it is her income and she will pay the tax on it. If that rent would have been added in Mr. X income, he would have paid 30% on it. But since she has slab rate benefits, the rent would be taxable comparatively at the road rate. So to address such concerns where people evade taxes through such routes when they are actually themselves generating the income, when they are actually themselves generating the income or having any other benefits. So the provisions of clubbing were introduced. Clubbing matlab the other person's income would be clubbed as in added, as in included in the assessee's income. So the clubbing provision goes from section 60 to 65. There are clubbing provisions majorly in 5 different segments, which are there on your screen if you see. And only these clubbing provisions would apply. Even if you're evading tax or even if you're trying to show it someone else's income, if they're not falling from section 60 to 65, the clubbing provisions would not apply. First is if you see it's transfer of income without transfer of asset. Matlab you're transferring the income, but you are not transferring the asset, just like I gave you an example of Mr. X, whereby he was transferring the income that is rent to his wife account, but he had the property was his in name. So clubbing provisions would apply. Then income coming from revocable transfer. ये क्या होता है? We'll understand. Then when spouse income would be clubbed, when son's wife income would be clubbed, and when minor's income would be clubbed. And there is one HUF related also, when HUF's income would be clubbed. Only these handful of 5-6 provisions are there which would apply in case of clubbing. So can I say the first two apply to all assessees? And spouse income, minor incomes, incomes of sons and HUF would apply only to individual assessee. Matlab, these provisions of clubbing of spouse income obviously would come in individual. Clubbing of son's wife, as in daughter-in-law, bahu, का income club कब होगा आपकी income के साथ. So you have to understand this as a person who is the assessee himself, and when the minor income would be clubbed with your income. So the entire clubbing is in these 5 parts. इसके अलावा no other income would be clubbed. इसके अलावा no other income would be clubbed. There might be other provision which would be impacting that evasion, but suppose son's income cannot be clubbed until and unless he's a minor. If he's a major son, his income would not be clubbed. Similarly, daughter's income would not be clubbed if she's a major. ठीक है? Got it? Proceed करें? चलो. So the first hang. Just 1 second. So the first clubbing provision comes under my friend under section 60, transfer of income without transfer of assets. This is an extremely simple section having nothing technical, simple sa hai. If it can be of any relationship, if I hold the asset with me, but I don't I hold the asset with me, but I don't get the right to get the income. I transfer that right to get the income to some other person. Then the clubbing would happen in the hand of whom? In the hand of the person who is the actual owner of the asset. So if I take an example here of Mr. A as given here, Mr. A confers the right to receive the rent in respect of house property to his wife. अब Mr. A के पास एक घर है जिसका रेंट उन्होंने बोला कि गिव इट टू मिसेस ए. टेक्निकली मिसेस ए के पास जो रेंट आएगा, यू से कि सिंस इट इज कमिंग इन हर बैंक अकाउंट, इट इज हर इनकम. नो, बट सिंस द ओनर ऑफ द एसेट इज मिस्टर ए, ही जस्ट डाइवर्टेड दिस इनकम सो दैट ही कैन evade tax or maybe pay lower taxes. The clubbing provisions would apply, and this income, rental income, would be considered to be income of Mr. A only. And how it would be considered? Through clubbing provision of section 60. Got it? Simple. Next is income arising from revocable transfer of asset. So you have to understand again that there is an asset which has been transferred, but the transfer is revocable. Now, what do you mean by a transfer is revocable? When I say there is a revocable transfer, that means I have transferred that, but I can get that back at any time, or even after transfer, I either have, as a transferor, I either have right on the income or maybe right on the asset. Because when you transfer, guys, when you transfer any asset, you're transferring the rights of that asset, correct? Transfer, if you will go and understand the meaning is giving up the right on the asset, correct? So when I've transferred it, but still if I'm having any of the provision through which I can get that asset back, or I enjoy the right on the income which the asset would generate, or I enjoy the right on the asset directly or indirectly, directly or indirectly, that is called a revocable transfer. For example, I gave, I transferred the asset to you with the condition कि इससे whatever income would come would be my income. This is a revocable transfer. I transferred the asset to you with the condition that I can take that asset back at any time in 1 year. This is a revocable transfer. I transferred the asset to you with the power that whatever you will do with the asset confers in me, as in I have the right on the asset. This is a revocable transfer. Why would people do revocable transfer? Because again, they want to show that the legal ownership is in someone else's hand, but ultimately they are enjoying the right on the asset. Ultimately, they are enjoying the right on the asset. So section 60 को beat करने के लिए आपने transfer तो कर दिया. To beat section 60 का provisions where there is transfer of income without transfer of asset, you actually did a transfer of asset, but you are making it a revocable transfer in a way that you are enjoying the right either on the asset or on the income and have a right to get it back. Okay, so in that case, you have to put clubbing provision on whatever income that asset is generating. Now, suppose I've transferred you the asset, but I say that I have a right to 50% of the income. Then 50% of the income would be clubbed. Then 50% of the income would be clubbed. So suppose I've given you, say, debentures, but I've set a condition that the interest would be used for the benefit of my school fees. So that interest, it has to be clubbed. Got it? So revocable transfer, the clubbing is under section 61, but revocable transfer ka meaning is under section 63, and uske exceptions are given under section 62. तो इसको हम कैसे याद करेंगे? If you want to remember it by section, so you say section 60 में आ गया, what did section 60 cover? Transfer of income without transfer of asset. So income would be clubbed. The transfer of income without transfer of asset. Then it is section of revocable transfer, which says section 61 में clubbing होगा of income which has happened under revocable transfer. But revocable transfer क्या है? That is explained in section 63. What is revocable transfer? That is explained under section 63. Do not get confused, okay? And section 62 tells that what are the exceptions, that even if it is a revocable transfer, but clubbing would not apply. Even if it is a revocable transfer, but clubbing would not apply. So now our focus is on understanding the exceptions to revocable transfer. So revocable transfer का क्या मतलब है? That I will get a right to on an income or right on the asset, okay? And it can be retransferred. The asset can be retransferred. Now, what are the exceptions? Exception is simple. That it is a revocable transfer. Definitely it is a revocable transfer, but it is not revocable during the lifetime of the transferee or beneficiary. क्या बोला मैंने? What did I say? It is a revocable transfer. I might get the asset back, or I might get to enjoy the right on the asset back, but not during the lifetime of transferee or beneficiary. For example, A transferred an asset to B, which was revocable on a condition, that is, after B dies, the asset will come back to it. It is a revocable transfer because asset will come back. There is a provision of retransfer. But it was with the condition that it would happen only after the lifetime of beneficiary, that is once B dies. So even if it is a revocable transfer, even if from the date of transfer itself it has a provision that it will come back, but comeback is happening after the death of transferee. Transferee है ना ये हमारे. This B is transferee. This person B is transferee. So the provision of revoking back is after the death of transferee. Hence, this is an exception. Hence, this is an exception. So the income which is earned during the lifetime of the transferee, that is B in this case, would not be clubbed. Why? Because revocable provisions get triggered after the death, after the death of the beneficiary. Had the revocable provisions been triggered before the death of beneficiary without any condition, then the income would have been clubbed since day one. But revocable thing is happening after the death of the transferee, that is allowed. That is not allowed in the sense mean that will not attract clubbing provisions. Okay. ट्रांसफरी हो गया बेनिफिशियरी कैसे होता है बेनिफिशियरी का कॉन्सेप्ट कम्स अंडर ट्रस्ट कि ए ट्रांसफर्ड एन एसेट टू अ ट्रस्ट and that asset is basically transferred so that the care of B can be taken. Now, B is getting the benefit of that asset, and it is actually transferred to trust. So now, if in this case, if the asset is revocable after the death of the beneficiary, who is B in this case, even if it is revocable transfer, but it would not be considered for clubbing provisions. Okay, so two sections of clubbing covered. Section 60, which is extremely income, transfer of income with extremely easy transfer of income without transfer of asset. And section 61, income in case of revocable transfer. Revocable transfer is a transfer when you transfer the right, when you transfer the asset, but still you enjoy the right on the asset or maybe on the right on the income, and there can be provision of retransfer. But exception is that even if the revocable thing happens after the death of beneficiary, then it would not be considered for clubbing provisions. ये दोनों आते हैं बट इतने इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं होते बट यू शुड नो द मीनिंग ऑफ रिवोकेबल थिंग Okay, revocable Benami transaction. Okay, I'll not use any words which will confuse people. Very good question, Rituraj. So Rituraj says, is it necessary that the transferee should be relative or not? Not at all. It is not necessary. A transferee can be any person under section 60 and 61. Manish, I hope way of trust for example be clear where I transferred the asset to trust, but it would be used for someone else's benefit. So after the death of that beneficiary, if the asset is revocable, it would not be considered for clubbing provisions. I'm not saying it is not a revocable transfer, but I'm saying the revocation happens after the death of the person who's getting benefit from it, not a problem. Then it would not be considered for clubbing. It's a genuine transfer. बिकॉज गाइस जहां पे जेन्युइनिटी नहीं है और वेयर देयर इज नो जेन्युइननेस क्लबिंग वुड अट्रैक्ट देन व्हेन देयर इज अ जेन्युइन ट्रांसफर और व्हेन देयर इज अ ट्रांसफर फॉर समवन्स बेनिफिट no clubbing would attract because I told you these are the checkpoints put in by government to check where the people are evading taxes or diverting their income so that they can pay less taxes. समझ आ गई दोनों provisions? Now the interesting one and the relatable one begins. Shali, I hope the screen is visible now. Chalo. Enough time? Okay. So एक तो था income of from other asset actually included in necessities income where we saw section 60 and 61. Now is income of other persons included in individual total income. Guys, यहाँ पे please be careful to understand section 64. आपको अपने आप को individual समझना है. You have to consider individual. It might be that there is transfer of asset, etc., but you have to consider yourself as individual. ठीक है, वन बाय वन we'll do all. You can make this chart. So section 64 में the clubbing provisions would apply on this SC if the income, maybe on the income of which is earned by spouse, son's wife, minor, and HUF. ठीक है, स्पाउस का कौन कौन सा इनकम, स्पाउस का रेम्यूनरेशन, यानी स्पाउस का रेम्यूनरेशन कब आपकी इनकम में क्लब होगा. ओके, स्पाउस रेम्यूनरेशन, income from any asset which is transferred without consideration or without an adequate consideration, uh, and income from any asset which is transferred for the benefit of spouse. We do one by one, don't worry. Similarly, son's wife में remuneration नहीं है guys, but same है, asset transferred to son's wife without consideration or without adequate consideration, and asset transferred to someone else for the benefit of son's wife. करेंगे one by one. एंड देन माइनर का कौन सा इनकम क्लब होगा और एचयूएफ का कौन सा इनकम इंडिविजुअल में क्लब होगा. Guys, I'm repeating again and again. If there is any other income which you see, yes, that maybe evasion has happened or maybe tax planning has happened to reduce the burden of taxes, but it would not attract clubbing provisions from Section 64. Why? Because they only cover these people. So, brother का income club नहीं होगा, father का income club नहीं होगा, mother का income club नहीं होगा, daughter, son, major son का income club नहीं होगा. Only the income which are there for spouse, son's wife, minor, and HUF, and that too coming from the provision which we are discussing. सबसे पहले, the first thing we have to understand that when spouse remuneration would be clubbed with the assessee's income. Spouse का remuneration हो गया salary, by whatever name you want to call. You want to call it commission, you want to call it whatever you want to call it, salary, wages, whatever. So when does the spouse income gets clubbed for remuneration? For remuneration in the hands of assessee. First of all, for understanding this, you have to understand that the spouse, so यहाँ पे हम spouse को बोलेंगे Mrs. X, is getting salary, remuneration, etc. from a concern. Concern matlab obviously it can be a company, it can be a firm, it can be a proprietorship, anything. ठीक है? Spouse is getting what? Is getting remuneration from a concern in the concern where assessee or his relative or assessee with his relative, I should say, has substantial interest. किसका substantial interest है? Assessee का with relatives. किसमें? Concern में, which is paying salary to the spouse. और किसका substantial interest होना है वहां पे? Assessee और and his relatives का. ठीक है? So अब एक natural सा चीज है. If substantial interest क्या होता है? First question is, ma'am, what is substantial interest? See, substantial interest is when you have 20% or more का voting power or 20% or more का profit sharing ratio. When I talk about company, I talk about in the sense of voting power. When I talk about any other concern, we talk about in the case of profit sharing ratio. So suppose spouse is getting salary from X Limited. So X Limited में at least assessee and relative का 20% voting power, as in 20% or more का holding होना चाहिए, equity holding. Or suppose X is getting salary from not X Limited but Messrs XYZ, which is a firm in which assessee is a partner with a profit sharing ratio of 30%. So this is substantial interest. ठीक है? So 20% or more का holding, which is voting power, or 20% or more का profit sharing ratio would make that concern a concern in which assessee and his relative has substantial interest. Got it? Either the assessee can hold this or his relative can have it. Relative में कौन आएगा मैम? Relative में आएगा spouse, mother, father, brother, sister, lineal descendant and descendant. So suppose if there is Mr. X. So Mr. X along with Mrs. X, along with his or her father, mother, along with brother, sister of Mr. X, and along with any lineal descendant and lineal descendant, if them together holds a substantial holding in concern where Mrs. X is getting a remuneration from, then the provisions would attract. Then the provisions would attract. So the first thing which would trigger clubbing provisions in case of remuneration of the spouse is the concern में इनमें से किसी का या सबका मिला के all of them together or maybe a single of them have a substantial interest in the concern. The reason is simple. When you have a substantial interest in the concern, you have a controlling power in the concern, correct? Controlling power in the concern, and you can mold the decision of that concern, or you can mold the operations of that concerns, working of that concern. You can have a right on the operations of that concern. So, us understanding say now they have developed this part. Now the question is कि मैम salary क्यों club होगा? Now if a relative or an assessee has substantial interest in this concern and the spouse is getting salary or remuneration or whatever name you want to call from this concern, but she's getting it without any talent or qualification, without any qualification or talent or skills for which she's getting a salary, that means there is something fishy. And if something like this is happening, then whatever the salary she's getting would be clubbed in the hands of assessee, would be clubbed in the hands of assessee. Not in the hand of spouse, but in the hands of assessee. मैम मतलब अब हम इनको ऐसे लेते हैं. So suppose Mrs. X is getting salary from a partnership firm XYZ, where X is having 30% shareholder, 30% voting power. Now the salary Mrs. X is getting from XYZ firm, okay, is she's actually a doctor, but she's getting a salary of a marketing head, for which she clearly does not have any skills or for which she clearly does not have any qualification. That means they're just zabardasti showing an expense so that the profit can be reduced and maybe Mrs. X might not have that much income, and showing that as a salary in her income return would not impact much from the taxes perspective. So people do that, correct? So in that case, this salary income would be clubbed in the hands of X, who is the assessee, because the question is spouse ka remuneration would be clubbed. When it would be clubbed? When in a concern, the assessee or his relative has substantial interest and that concern is giving remuneration without any talent or qualification, to the spouse. क्यों दे रहे हो आप? Because obviously you have some thoughts of evading the tax. In that case, clubbing provisions would attract. When would clubbing provisions not attract? Obviously, when the spouse is having that technical knowledge for which she's being paid off, or having that professional qualification or skills for which she's paid off. If suppose she has done MBA in marketing and then she's being paid for the marketing position, then that makes sense. Then there would not be clubbing. It's not necessary that always clubbing would happen. Clubbing, obviously, I told you, would happen when there is no genuinity or where there is lack of genuineness. And in this case, where she's not having a qualification is a big red flag, right? And hence the clubbing provisions would be attracted when she does not have a qualification. So the conditions which you have to see is first, substantial interest, second, getting remuneration, and third, having no qualification. All these three conditions, if satisfied, would attract clubbing in the hands of assessee. Got it? Now the question comes, ma'am, suppose Mr. X also has a substantial interest. Mr. X is there's a company called A Limited, okay, in which Mr. X has say 15% holding, and Mrs. X has say 10% holding. ओके अब सब्सटैंशियल इंटरेस्ट तो दोनों का हो गया बिकॉज assessee and relative together if they have 20% or more because x के लिए Mrs. X is the relative, Mrs. X के लिए x is the relative, correct? So they both have substantial interest in A Limited. Both have substantial interest in A Limited. Now both are getting remuneration. Now both are getting remuneration. Now the question comes in whose hand the clubbing would happen. First of all, both should be getting remuneration without qualification. Okay. Now if both are getting remuneration without qualification, then the clubbing would happen in in the hand of the person whose other income excluding this remuneration is higher, whose other income excluding this remuneration is higher. So suppose Mr. X is getting a salary of 3 lakhs from A Limited and Mrs. X is getting a salary of 2.5 lakh from A Limited. Both are not qualified for the job, okay? And both have substantial interest. Now the question comes कि 3 lakhs, 2 lakh 50 में Mrs. X में club होगा और Mrs. X का salary X में club होगा. कैसे होगा? So you have to see what are their other income. Suppose Mr. X has other income of rent, which is say 4 lakh. And Mrs. X has other income. I'm not calling other sources income. I'm just saying other income of say interest of say 2 lakh. So किसके hand में clubbing would apply? Clubbing provision would apply in the hands of Mr. X. So Mr. X का total income क्या हो जाएगा? This 4 lakh plus salary of 3 lakh plus salary of 2,50,000 which is now being clubbed. And Mrs. X का income क्या रहेगा? 2 lakh only. Guys, remember whenever clubbing is happened, the income would be taxed only in the hands of one person who is the assessee, not in the hands of the other person. Same income cannot be taxed in the hands of both the people. So यहाँ पे total income would be 4 plus 3 plus 250 through clubbing provisions. Total 950. यहाँ पे the total income would remain to 2 lakh only. Okay. Got it? Now the question comes, ma'am, next year क्या करेंगे? So once the clubbing provision starts with the person who has higher income, then subsequently the clubbing would happen in the hands of Mr. X only. Even if later Mrs. X has a higher income, it will continue to happen in the hands of Mr. X until and unless an assessing officer pokes his neck and says that no, clubbing would not happen in Mr. X hand, but now would happen in Mrs. X hand. Okay, so first year, whenever the clubbing is happening in whose income is higher, it will continue to club in the same person's hand. Got it? Quickly now see, quickly do illustration 2 and tell me if there's any doubt. We have taken the example also. Quickly watch illustration 2 and if there is any doubt, please do let me know. देवराज सॉरी हिंदी मैं जितना कोशिश कर सकती हूँ आई एम यूजिंग बट आई एम नॉट अलाउड टू Swati, if A has transferred the house property, but during the lifetime, if A is getting the right of income, then it is clubbing. उसके बाद, see, clubbing is when, in case of revocable transfer, clubbing happens. Swati, please listen. In case of revocable transfer, clubbing happens when during the lifetime of a person, you either are enjoying the right on the asset or on the right on the income. In your case, Mr. A is enjoying the right on the income during the lifetime of B. Okay, so clubbing would happen. But When would clubbing would not happen? When you are not enjoying the right on the asset or right on the income, or when you get the right on the asset or right on income after the death of the beneficiary of the transferee. Even if it is revocable, but it is revocable after the death, then clubbing would not happen. If income is clubbed, guys, losses would also be clubbed. Spouse father has a substantial interest in the company, and she is getting the income, then इस case में clubbing नहीं होगा. Very good question, Vishal. A sesi ka spouse should be getting remuneration. The relationship for clubbing is the remuneration is received by the spouse of the sesi, not daughter of the sesi or any other person. Okay, it's not wife or husband. Ramadevi, it is spouse. Yes, if Suman, if Mr. X has 20% interest and Mrs. X has 20% interest, and Mr. X has 1% interest, then will salary of Mrs. X would be included in Mr. X income. First of all, आपको देखना है remuneration किसको मिल रहा है, spouse को. Okay, assessee का substantial interest है, because it is more than 20%, substantial interest है. Now the question comes whether Mrs. X is getting that salary without any qualification. If the answer is yes, clubbing would happen in the hands of Mr. X. Yes, if during Akram Ansari, if during the lifetime of the transferee, the assessee has the right to take the asset back or the right to enjoy the income of the asset, then in that case it is a revocable transfer, which will attract clubbing provisions. Very good, Sohail. Very good, Patindya. Very, very good. ठीक है, क्लैरिटी आ गया सबको? See, remuneration wala question is the best way to do is who is getting remuneration, then whether she or he is the spouse of any person, whether the assessee has the substantial interest, yes. Now, whether the person who's getting remuneration is qualified for it, yes, then clubbing would. And if she's not qualified, then clubbing would happen. If she's qualified, clubbing would not happen. If interest is less than 20%, as a substantial interest नहीं prove होगा, तब तक clubbing नहीं आएगा. That's what I say. See step by step. If Mr. X and Mrs. X are partners in partnership firm, and guys, obviously they will have substantial interest, so then this question would apply. Now, who is getting remuneration without qualification? See, the idea of clubbing of remuneration of spouse income is that you are just giving salary for the sake of it. The person is not qualified, the person is not doing any skill-oriented job in that company or a firm or any concern. He's just getting salary so that the income can be molded, tweaked, just for that sake. If it's a genuine case, clubbing would not apply. यस गाइड, अभी लॉस पे नहीं आए, अभी सिर्फ हम सैलरी पे आए हैं, रेम्यूनरेशन की बात हो रही है. सो प्लीज स्टिक टू द रेम्यूनरेशन में देयर इज नो लॉस, बट अदरवाइज इफ इनकम इज क्लब, लॉसेस आर आल्सो क्लब. टीडीएस आप रिटर्न फाइलिंग में क्लेम करोगे, you will claim it because the other person does not know कि clubbing provisions are happening or not. You will claim it. So guys, clubbing कैसे happen होता है? Whenever clubbing is happening, first of all you have to compute it as an income of recipient only. That recipient who is actually the recipient that person is getting the income, he उसी का income है, उसी manner में you have to compute as if the income is of the recipient, okay? And the same income after computation, after considering all the thing, would be included in assessee's income and under the same head in which it was to be included in the recipient's head, recipient's income. ठीक है, same head में जाएगा, same after computing everything जाएगा, and then it would be club, okay? नेक्स्ट पार्ट करते हैं, रेम्युनरेशन वाला पार्ट क्लियर, कोई डाउट गाइस? नेक्स्ट पार्ट इज ट्रांसफर ऑफ एसेट टू स्पाउस विदाउट कंसिडरेशन और विदाउट एडवोकेट कंसिडरेशन. प्लीज इसको ध्यान से सुनना. दिस इज अ वेरी 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 इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट. एवरीवन प्लीज फोकस हियर. Transfer of asset without consideration or advocate consideration. ठीक है, स्टार्ट करें. ओके. So this particular provision of clubbing, which is under section 64(1)(4), talks about where Mr. X transfers an asset to Mrs. X and Mrs. X has not paid any consideration or have paid a consideration but is not advocate. ठीक है. Then clubbing provisions would apply on the income which is generated from this asset. On the income which is generated from this asset. Clarity. Asset which we are talking about under section 64 has to be other than house property. यानी house property अगर transfer हो रहा है without consideration, section 64 would not be attracted. 64(1)(4). Section 64(1)(4) would not be attracted. You will say, why, ma'am? Because, guys, if you remember, transfer of asset of house property without transfer of house property without consideration, if you remember, has been covered under section 27. Section 27 talks about where you transfer house property without consideration or advocate consideration, then the provisions of deemed ownership comes. तो वहां पे तो वो सेसी डीम्ड ओनर माना जाता है, करेक्ट? सेसी ऑलरेडी बिकम्स डीम्ड ओनर. सो व्हेन मिस्टर एक्स ट्रांसफर्स house property to Mrs. X, then clubbing would not apply. If it is without consideration, even if it is without consideration, clubbing would not apply. So you say, ma'am, it is wrong. No, guys, I'm saying clubbing would not apply. But why it would not apply? Because there is already a specific section of deemed ownership. When Mr. X, when a person transfers asset, which is house property, to spouse without consideration, then even if it is transferred, but X is always considered to be the owner. So X is also considered to be the owner. X will show it under his house property and pay the taxes on it. Income ja X ke under hai, but not through clubbing route, but through deemed ownership route. Through deemed ownership route. So whenever there is house property involved between transferor and transferee being husband and wife, then section 27 would involve, but not section 64. Ultimately, it is getting taxed in the hands of Mr. X only, either through clubbing or deemed ownership. But there, the concept of deemed ownership is going and not clubbing. Okay, so whenever now I'll be talking about section 64 subsection 1 clause 4, I'll be talking about asset which is other than house property. Got it? Now the question comes, when and how the clubbing would apply. Mr. X ने दिखा दिया कि this घर belongs to my, I'll not talk about घर. Mr. X shows that shares or say debentures. Debentures belongs to my wife. ट्रांसफर कर दिए डिबेंचर्स वाइफ के नाम पे. वाइफ ने कोई कंसिडरेशन नहीं दी. वाइफ डिड नॉट पे एनी कंसिडरेशन. नाउ द इंटरेस्ट व्हिच वुड बी जनरेटेड फ्रॉम सच डिबेंचर्स Interest which would be generated from such debentures would be clubbed in the hands of who? In the hands of assessee who has transferred the asset without consideration. Interest would be interest would be clubbed in the hands of assessee under section 64(1)(4). So what conditions are important? A, the condition is that the relationship of husband and wife should be there at the time of transfer also and at the time of accrual of income. यानी जब ट्रांसफर हो रहा है तब भी दोनों हस्बैंड एंड वाइफ है एंड व्हेन द इनकम दैट इज इंटरेस्ट व्हिच इज जनरेटेड then at that time also the relationship of husband and wife subsists. So at the time of transfer and at the time of accrual of income. Number one. Number two, the asset is transferred without consideration or without advocate consideration. Okay, so consideration is missing or advocacy is not there. Okay. Third, love and affection cannot be called as consideration. Love and affection is not a consideration. I cannot say that out of love I have transferred the asset and love is pretty much a consideration. No, it is not a consideration. If it is a consideration, it is not an advocate consideration. Okay, so love and affection, not a consideration. And fourth, section 64(1) clause 4 would not apply on house property. Because on house property, what is applicable? Section 27 is applicable. And last, if a asset is transferred as a connection to live apart, connection to live apart. Then in that case, section 64 would not come because a connection to live apart matlab you're given that asset as alimony. Divorce के time पे settlement पे दिया. Obviously consideration तो नहीं लोगे. You're given the asset during the time of divorce or for connection to living apart. Then in that case, clubbing would not happen. Clubbing would not happen. So these are all the points when I talk about section 64, subsection 4, transfer of an asset to spouse without consideration or without advocate consideration, income to be taxed in the hands of transferor who is the assessee. एक बारी quickly go through and if there is any doubt in relation to this, please ask. No problem, Kulveer. लिव अपार्ट मतलब डाइवोर्स ओके सेपरेशन then in that case Vishali clubbing would apply because obviously wife got the asset without any consideration so clubbing would apply. And writing से समझ आ जाएगा ओके So section 64, 1(4) talks about income from assets transferred to spouse, directly, indirectly, without consideration or without advocate consideration. So whatever income would be arise would be taxed in the hands of the transferor, would be clubbed in the hands of the transferor. But clubbing provisions तभी apply होंगे when there is inadequate consideration. If the transfer is happening for an advocate consideration, wife has given the money from it, clubbing provisions would not apply. And love and affection is not to be considered as advocate consideration. Okay? The relationship of husband and wife should exist between the transferor and the transferee at the time of transfer of the asset as well as at the time of accrual of the income. Any transfer which is made prior to the marriage would not fall under the clubbing provisions. Okay? And husband and wife should be there. We will not talk about any relationship, but a husband and wife relationship. Any and obviously house property is not covered here. Transfer may be direct, indirect, whatever way you call it through cross transfer. We'll cover those also provisions. Then the clubbing provisions have to apply. So whatever the income that asset would be generating would be clubbed in the hands of the transferor. And transfer and agreement to live apart would not be considered for clubbing provisions. ठीक है. सेक्शन 64 सबसेक्शन 1 क्लॉज 4 इज ओनली फॉर स्पाउस. मैंने लिखा था ना सेक्शन 64 में 4-5 पॉइंट्स, स्पाउस, सन्स, वाइफ, माइनर एंड योर एचयूएफ. अभी हम कर रहे हैं सेक्शन 64 क्लॉज 1 सब सेक्शन 64 सबसेक्शन 1 क्लॉज 4. Coming to the accredited part. Wait guys. Total income exempt. अगर वो exempt in the hands of person है तो it would be exempt in the hands of the assessee also. Okay, next part which you have to consider here is accreted income. Accreted income का concept क्या है guys? This applies to every clubbing income. Please listen carefully. Mr. X transferred debentures in our example to Mrs. X. Suppose 10 lakhs के debentures दिए on which the interest of what came? Of 1 lakh rupees came. So 1 lakh would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X, correct? Because debentures were transferred without any consideration. Hence, income would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X, who is the transferor. Clear. Now, from this 1 lakh, Mrs. X purchased more debentures. Mrs. X purchased more debentures. Say, on this 1 lakh also, she purchased another 10 debentures. Now what is happening? 10 lakh पे भी interest आ रहा है and 1 lakh पे भी interest आ रहा है. Because 10 lakh पे interest आया फिर से 1 lakh rupees year 2 में and 1 lakh पे interest आया 10,000 rupees. Now what would be clubbed? Only this 1 lakh would be clubbed. Income which is getting accredited, yani from further investment of the clubbing income would not attract clubbing provisions, would not attract clubbing provisions. Accreditation or accretion of transferred asset would not attract clubbing provisions. Year 2 में भी 1 lakh guys club होगा but 10,000 club नहीं होगा. Year 2 में भी 1 lakh would be clubbed but not 10,000. Any income which is coming from accretion of the transferred asset is not to be clubbed. Got it? जो आपने ट्रांसफर किया है विदाउट कंसिडरेशन, खाली दैट और विदाउट एडवोकेट कंसिडरेशन, ओनली दैट हैज टू बी क्लब. चलिए नेक्स्ट प्रोविजन में गाइस. ओके. the points are covered. Don't worry. Okay. Suppose, guys, I can transfer asset without consultation. Now, asset can be anything. Now, asset can be an investment also. Asset can be an investment in the business also. Asset can be an investment in the business also. Now, suppose Mrs. X, ध्यान से सुनना. Mrs. X is a partner in a firm. Okay. Now, naturally, Mrs. X has to give capital. Capital by what return comes is profit. Profit is the income, correct? What if that capital has come from the husband? What if that capital has come from the husband, or part of the capital has come from the husband, or part of the capital contribution has come from the husband? So naturally, what would be the income, guys? Profit. Profit would be income, hence clubbing would attract? Yes. So if a person is investing in spouse business, if a person is investing in spouse business, and the income generating from that, which would naturally be profit, would be clubbed in the hands of the assessee, would be clubbed in the hands of the assessee, provided the capital contribution has happened at the beginning of the year. Because the profit for the purpose of clubbing would be divided based on the capital contribution which is there on the beginning of the year. And in case in the capital contribution, there is a contribution coming from Mr. X. In case in the capital contribution of Mrs. X, the money is coming from Mr. X, then in that case, if it is happening at the beginning of the year or on the opening balance, then in that case, clubbing provisions would apply, and the income which would be clubbed is profit. Ma'am, समझ में आया? Let's take example of Vaibhav and Vishali. So Vaibhav started a proprietary business on 1st of April 2022 with a capital of 5 lakh. We are talking on 1st April 2022, 5 lakh capital. किसका? वैभव का. He incurred a loss of 2 lakh during the year 22-23. अब वो 2 lakh का लॉस हो गया, तो कैपिटल कितने का बचा? 3 lakh का. गाइस, कैपिटल अकाउंट तो पता ही है ना सबको. Contribution less profits or less losses at profits. ठीक है. So now the capital as on 1st April 23 is 3 lakhs. वैभव का. ठीक है. अभी तक there is nothing of clubbing. Now what happened? Now, since he saw that financial position is getting tight, he asked his wife to give me some investment. So his wife gave an investment as a gift for 5 lakhs as on 1st April 23. अब 1st April 23 को guys total capital कितना हो गया? 3 plus 5 lakh total 8 lakh. 3 plus 5 total 8 lakh. 8 lakhs में से 3 lakhs is coming from Vishali. Sorry, 3 lakhs. 8 lakhs में से 5 lakhs is coming from Vishali and 3 lakh is of Vaibhav's opening capital. ठीक है? And it was so lucky that Vaibhav earned a profit of 4 lakhs in 23-24. Vaibhav earned a profit of 4 lakhs in 23-24. Now you have to see whether any clubbing provisions would attract. Yes, because the profit which is earned in 23-24 would attract clubbing provisions. But how much? Simple. Vishali ने कितना दिया? 4 lakh के profit में, which has happened on a capital of 8 lakh rupees. Vishali gave 5 lakh. Vishali gave 5 lakh. Correct? So here 2,50,000 would be clubbed in the hands of Vishali. Why? Because out of the profit of 4 lakh, 2,50,000 is coming because of the capital of 5 lakh. Okay, got it? Without guys, or 1,50,000 would be the profit of Vaibhav. Simple. एक बारी देख लो. And let me know if there's any doubt. वाइफ का समझ आ गया, सन वाइफ का और बीसीएस। इलस्ट्रेशन 5 एक्सप्लेन कर दी श्रीनिवासन। देवराज, ट्रांसफर ऑफ एसेट में सब्सटैंशियल इंटरेस्ट नहीं देखना आपको, सब्सटैंशियल इंटरेस्ट यू हैव टू सी व्हेन द रेम्युनरेशन वाला क्वेश्चन इज देयर। क्विकली लेट मी नो इफ देयर इज एनी डाउट। क्लियर है? यस, नो, एनीथिंग, कहीं पे कंफ्यूजन? माइन्यूट सी, बड़ी सी, कोई पे भी कंफ्यूजन? परफेक्ट, वेरी गुड। सो लास्ट पार्ट, आपने एसेट ट्रांसफर करा फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ स्पाउस विदाउट कंसिडरेशन, इट वुड बी इंक्लूडेड इन योर इनकम। ये दिस कम्स वेरी अर्लियर। सपोज मिस्टर एक्स ट्रांसफर्ड an asset, it can be any asset. Mr. X transferred an asset, say debentures, not to his wife, but to a person, say Mr. A, saying that whatever this particular debenture, say whatever comes would be used for the benefit of my wife. So basically, you have to give that money directly to the wife, or for anyhow that money would now be used for wife. So it's a case where you're transferring an asset not directly to the wife, but to some other person, so that clubbing provision would not apply. But if ultimately the income from that particular asset is being used for the benefit of spouse, then clubbing provision would apply and the interest would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X. Interest would be clubbed in the hands of the assessee or the transferor, which is in this case is Mr. X. So can I conclude, when I talk about clubbing of spouse income, there can be either clubbing of remuneration. If I talk about spouse income, when would spouse income would be clubbed? When either it's a remuneration, salary, commission, whatever name, coming from a concern in which SSC and his relative has substantial interest and spouse is not qualified, or if it is coming from an asset which is transferred without consideration or inadequate consideration. Inadequate consideration. थोड़ा सा राइटिंग समझ लेना guys. Asset transfer without consideration or inadequate consideration other than house property, because house property में deemed ownership आ जाता है. No house property, okay? Or an asset is transferred for the benefit of spouse. तब उस केस में without consideration, without consideration for, or without adequate consideration for benefit of spouse. Or income would be clubbed if an amount is invested in spouse business. If an amount is invested in spouse business. यही सब प्रोविजंस पे क्लबिंग लगेगा. इसके अलावा देयर वुड बी नो क्लबिंग प्रोविजंस ऑफ स्पाउस इनकम टू सेसी. ठीक है, एक्रेडिशन ऑफ इनकम पे नो क्लबिंग प्रोविजंस. स्पाउस वाला इनकम क्लबिंग का क्लियर हो गया. नाउ वी कम टू स्पाउस वाइफ. एग्जैक्टली सेम प्रोविजन है. इजी प्रीजी है, करते हैं वन बाय वन. ओपनिंग कैपिटल मनोहर. मॉनेटरी इन्वेस्टमेंट हो, कैपिटल कंट्रीब्यूशन इन कैश और काइंड हो. कैपिटल कंट्रीब्यूशन में अगर आपका कंट्रीब्यूशन है, if in the business your of spouse you have made a contribution, so naturally clubbing would happen of profits obviously which is coming from business, but provided in the opening capital your contribution is included. अब नेक्स्ट ईयर भी जो प्रॉफिट होगा उसमें मेरा कैपिटल कंट्रीब्यूशन 3 लाख का रहेगा इन केस ऑफ विशाली वैभव. तो उसमें भी विशाली का कंट्रीब्यूशन वुड बी ऑफ 5 lakhs ओनली. एंड 5 lakhs पे वॉट एवर प्रॉफिट इज हैपनिंग उस पे क्लबिंग वुड हैव प्ले. गाइस, रिसिपिएंट के हैंड्स में गिफ्ट होगा या नहीं होगा? डेफिनेटली होगा. प्रोविजंस आर अट्रैक्टेड लाइक इनडायरेक्ट ट्रांसफर में. बट यहाँ पे वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द इनकम विच इज गेटिंग टैक्सेबल, विच इज जनरेटेड फ्रॉम दैट पर्टिकुलर एसेट. ओके, बाय एनी ऑफ द स्पाउस मतलब सिंपल सा. व्हेन इट इज कमिंग ऑफ अ बिजनेस क्वेश्चन, बिजनेस का क्वेश्चन है, उसमें व्हाट हैज टू बी क्लब्ड? द प्रॉफिट हैज टू बी क्लब्ड. यू हैव टू सी इन द ओपनिंग कैपिटल ऑफ दैट ईयर whether this if he has a contribution or not. If he has a contribution, then only clubbing would apply and proportionately you would apply. How would you apply proportionately? कितना प्रॉफिट हुआ, ओपनिंग कैपिटल कितना था, ठीक है, तो उनके शेयर पे कितना प्रॉफिट हुआ, सिंपल. रिलेटिव वुड बी सेम, रिलेटिव वुड बी सेम मेथड. अभी तो हमने सिर्फ स्पाउस का क्वेश्चन किया ना अक्रमा. लोन की तरह दिया हुआ तो क्लबिंग वुड नॉट अप्लाई. नो नो, लोन की तरह दिया हुआ क्लबिंग वुड नॉट अप्लाई. कैपिटल कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन, इन्वेस्टमेंट, बिजनेस इन्वेस्टमेंट. गुड नाज. अरे, ट्रांसफर ऑफ एसेट फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ स्पाउस मतलब आपने किसी को भी ट्रांसफर कर दिया एसेट और उसको कह दिया दैट द इनकम व्हिच वुड बी जनरेटेड फॉर दिस वुड बी यूज्ड फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ स्पाउस. And the asset which you have transferred is without advocate consideration. He has not given you any consideration for it. Or maybe he has not given you advocate consideration. So in a way, you have made an indirect transfer so the wife can get benefit. So that in that case, the income would be clear. Clubbing of income arising to son's wife. Yani when son's wife is having an income, when that would be clubbed in the hands of father-in-law or mother-in-law. ठीक है, इसमें एग्जैक्टली सेम है बट इसमें रेम्यूनरेशन नहीं है. यानी रेम्यूनरेशन where we talk about remuneration of spouse getting clubbed with the hands of assessee if the assessee has substantial interest, etc., and a concern from which the spouse is getting the income and remuneration basically, and spouse is not qualified. वो वाला पार्ट इसमें नहीं है. son's wife में क्या है? If you're transferring any asset without consideration, if you're investing in the business of son's wife, and if you are transferring any asset for the benefit of son's wife. वो जो 3 other part है ना except remuneration, that would attract clubbing provisions. So simply how would you remember? First of all, it We are talking about son's wife. Son's wife, बहू. So ये वाला कहीं पे भी these provisions are not applicable on daughter's husband or any other person. So the provisions which would be applicable are here are applicable in case of son's wife only. So who would give the gifts in this case? The father-in-law or the mother-in-law. If they are transferring anything to son's wife, any asset. अब यहाँ पे any asset लिखा है यहाँ पे other than house property I have not written. Any asset. It can be house property also. Ma'am, why? Because house property, if transferred without consideration only to spouse, comes under section 27 or children, etc. But if house property transfer without consideration, son's wife पे deemed ownership नहीं लगता, ठीक है? So that's why if a house property is transferred to son's wife, वहाँ पे section 64 ही आएगा. Section 64 would come in that place. So, when a father-in-law or a mother-in-law is transferring any asset, even if house property, to son wife, what without consideration or without advocate consideration? So then in that case, income from that asset, then in that case, income from this asset would be clubbed in the hands of father-in-law or mother-in-law who has transferred the asset. Simple. So suppose if I transfer the asset to my bahu, whose son's wife, debentures, the interest would be clubbed in my hands. If I transfer the asset of house property, the rent would be clubbed in my hands. If I transfer the asset to my son's wife being shares, dividend would be clubbed in my hands. If I transfer the asset, say fixed deposits, interest again would be clubbed in my hands. But now if from that income, if she's generating any other income or buying any other asset, उसका income would not be clubbed. Exact similar provisions है. वहां पे सन्स वाइफ को हटा, अब स्पाउस को हटा के सन वाइफ लगाना है. बट रिमेंबर, हाउस प्रॉपर्टी के केस में स्पाउस एंड एसएससी में सेक्शन 27 अप्लाइज. बट हाउस प्रॉपर्टी के केस में बिटवीन फादर इन लॉ एंड मदर इन लॉ, सन्स फादर इन लॉ, मदर इन लॉ एंड सन्स वाइफ में सेक्शन 64 वुड अप्लाई जस्ट लाइक एनी अदर एसेट. ओनली दिस डिफरेंस यू हैव टू रिमेंबर. किसी ने भी अगर क्लबिंग प्रोविजन लिख दिया ना इन केस ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी for spouse, I will come to your house and scold you. Okay, so clubbing provisions would not apply in case of in case of house property being transferred to spouse without consideration. Why? Because section 27 apply. But if it is transferred to son's wife, clubbing provisions would apply. I'm repeating it for the fourth time now. Got it? Similarly, if father-in-law, mother-in-law invest in the business of son's wife, then again, same opening capital में अगर उनका contribution है, then the profit in proportionate to that contribution would be clubbed. Similarly, if father-in-law and mother-in-law is transferring any asset to any other person without consideration for the benefit of son's wife, then also the clubbing provisions would apply. So all the three provisions which we discussed here for spouse, the last three would apply except for remuneration. So son's wife के केस में कौन सा income कब होगा? Income from asset transferred without consideration or advocate consideration. Income from asset transferred to any other person without consideration or advocate consideration to be used for benefit of son's wife. And income from an amount from a business, which is basically profit from a business in which you have made an investment on business इसका son's wife. ठीक है? सिंपल है. सन्स वाइफ पे कम क्वेश्चन आते हैं, बट इफ इट कम्स दिस इज द सिंपलेस्ट पार्ट. एक बार गो थ्रू करो क्विकली गाइस. विल टेक ब्रेक इन नेक्स्ट 10 minutes, so please immediately go through it. मिडिल ऑफ द ईयर में कंट्रीब्यूशन है तो उस साल में नहीं होगा, नेक्स्ट ईयर में आपका कंट्रीब्यूशन ओपनिंग में आ जाएगा गौंडी, तो नेक्स्ट ईयर में यू हैव टू कंसिडर इट. रेम्यूनरेशन का प्रोविजंस नहीं है वैशाली. Yes, father-in-law, mother-in-law में transfer is son's wife, transferor would be father-in-law or mother-in-law. So in their hand, the clubbing provisions would apply. Son's wife remuneration would be clubbed to son if son has substantial interest in the concern and wife is getting the remuneration without qualification. तो उसको वो तो सन्स वाइफ और सन क्यों बोलना ऐसे कंफ्यूज कर क्यों करना जस्ट टेक इट एज एसोसिएट स्पाउस ना खुद कंफ्यूज नहीं करना अपने आप को ओके middle of the year में Gandhi I'm saying if the contribution happens then it would be considered as capital of opening capital of the next year then next year के profits को you will club if opening capital में I have no contribution then my clubbing provisions would not apply. ठीक है now last part very important part rather clubbing of minor income के minor का income कब club होगा what is TYK Rito what is the reason for transferring the asset? See, India may there's a lot of gifting culture, but people what they do, they want to show that the asset is for some other person when actually you have paid the consideration for it. Why they want to show the asset is of some other person so that the income is of though it remains in the same house, though it remains in the same house, but they want to show that the income is also of the other person because the legal ownership is of the other person, but actually it is not true. You have not paid the consideration for it and hence the clubbing should apply because the intent is कि जिसका income जिसका contribution जिसका consideration उसका income so that's why clubbing applies. You can give the gifts. See, gifts में कोई issue नहीं है. Gifts would not be taxable as a recipient because of the exception under section 56 to 10. But you have to you have to basically see if the clubbing provisions are applicable or not. Srinivasan, if the time left, then definitely I'll do it. Next and very most important section 64 1A. अभी तक 1 के सारे provisions are either for spouse or son's wife. Now section 64 1A talks about clubbings of minor income. Minor कौन होता है guys? Anyone who has not attained the age of 18 is a minor. Girl हो boy हो does not matter. Okay, so minor का income would get clubbed in the hands of parents. In the hands of parents. So the question is there are two parents, as in mother and father. किसके hand में minor का income would get clubbed? In whose hand the minor's income would get clubbed? In the hands of the parent whose income is higher, excluding minor income. So suppose Mr. X and Mrs. X are parents of minor junior X. Okay. Now X my junior को कोई भी income होगा would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X or Mrs. X whose income is higher. Suppose Mr. X का other income excluding minor income is 4 lakhs and Mrs. X का other income excluding minor income is 6 lakhs. So the clubbing provision would apply naturally in the hands of mother. Naturally in the hands of mother. And again, just like once the clubbing provision starts happening in the hands of mother, now for the years to come, it will happen in the hands of mother only, even if in the subsequent year, father has higher income. Until and unless assessing officer says so, it will continue to happen in the hands of मदर ओनली। तो क्वेश्चन कम कि मैम माइनर को कैसे इनकम हो सकती है? माइनर को बहुत कॉमन है इंडिया में माइनर को इनकम होना। पीपल ओपन एफडी अकाउंट्स इन द नेम ऑफ माइनर, पीपल ओपन डीमैट अकाउंट, परचेज शेयर्स इन द नेम ऑफ माइनर. So whatever the income is getting generated, obviously minor is not doing all those investments. Those investments are either done through parents or for the benefit of minor. Okay. So all those income pay, whatever return is coming, would go in the hands of parents. So general rule is all the income of minor has to be clubbed with the hands of parent whose income is higher. Simple. कोई confusion? नहीं. Now the question comes, मैम कुछ exemption भी मिलेगा? Yes. सेक्शन 1032 में Mrs. X, that is the parents in whose hand the income is clubbed, would get an exemption. So suppose junior X को interest मिला from FD of 30,000. So this 30,000 would be included in income of Mrs. X. So now Mrs. X income is 6 lakhs per 30,000. No, but on 30,000, Mrs. X will get an exemption of, total exemption of 1032 में 1,500 per annum per child. मैक्सिमम 1,500 per annum per child. तो कितना टैक्स हो जाएगा? 28,500. अगर दो माइनर बच्चे हैं, दोनों का मैसेज एक्स के साथ हो रहा है, तो 1,500 फॉर वन चाइल्ड, 1,500 फॉर अनदर चाइल्ड, 1,500 फॉर वन चाइल्ड, 1,500 फॉर अनदर चाइल्ड. देयर इज नो रिस्ट्रिक्शन ऑफ 2 चिल्ड्रन, 3 चिल्ड्रन, एक्सेट्रा. 1,500 would be given for each child. अब suppose the income which is getting clubbed is only 1,000, then 1,000 का deduction for one child. अदर पर्सन, अदर माइनर से या अदर चाइल्ड से 4,000 का इनकम है, तो 4,000 माइनस 1,500, उसको टोटल 3,000 मत मारना. आई एम सेइंग इट अगेन. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ मिसेस एक्स के हैंड में द इनकम इज गेटिंग क्लब्ड ऑफ ए एंड बी हु आर हिज माइनर सन. A has 1,000 income as FD interest. B has 4,000 of income as FD interest. Now 1,000 pay you will get, Mrs. X will get exemption under section 1032 of 1,000 rupees only. You will not say 1 plus 4 minus 3,000. No. So ये 0 हो गया and 4,000 pay of 1,500. So this is 2,500. So the net taxable amount for clubbing part is 2,500. You will not say 5 minus 3 कर देते मैम 1,500 दोनों के. No, that is wrong. Okay, so 1,500 per annum per child you will get the exemption under section 1032. This exemption is not allowed if you are following section 115 BAC. चाइल्ड अडॉप्टेड हो, जो मर्जी हो, स्टेप चाइल्ड हो, जो लीगली अगर वो आपका चाइल्ड है, सेक्शन 64(1)(a would apply. Clubbing provisions would apply. Legitimate child पे clubbing provisions would apply. अब सपोज मैम पेरेंट ही एक है, डाइवोर्स हो गया पेरेंट्स का, तब किसके हैंड में क्लबिंग कोड अप्लाई? नेचुरली इन द हैंड्स ऑफ पेरेंट हु इज maintaining the child, तब you will not say whichever is higher. But one such exception is there. One such exception is there for clubbing. Exception is that if the minor is having income from natural talent like manual work, खुद वो मजदूरी करके पैसे कमा रहा है, और स्किल्स एंड टैलेंट है, मे बी ही इज गोइंग टू डांस इंडिया डांस एंड विनिंग देयर, मे बी इज गोइंग टू केबीसी एंड विनिंग देयर, then in that case the income is not club. The income is not club. Or maybe he went to KBC, उससे income कमा रहे. And especially if a minor is a person with disability, then also the incomes are not club. So these are the two exceptions when the income does not club, when is the minor is having any disability, or when the minor is generating income because of his own talent or because of his own work. Then clubbing provision would not apply. Now suppose if a person went to KBC, okay, the minor went to the KBC, अभी junior KBC भी चल रहा था, correct? He went to Kaun Banega Crorepati and he won there 5 lakh rupees. So this 5 lakhs would not be club naturally because he has won it because of his own talent. 5 lakh ka returned income would be filed through guardian. That is a different thing. Now suppose the parent invested this 5 lakhs in FD. And उस FD से now if any interest is coming, that my friend would be club. यहाँ पे ये accreted income नहीं है. ये है कि minor को कोई भी income आया would be club except from his own talent or manual work. ठीक है? So यहाँ पे इसको accreted income का concept मत देना. Any income which minor is getting is to be clubbed, as I told you at the beginning of the section. But if it is coming from skills and talent, then only it would not be club. Now, suppose skills and talent की income को invest करके if any income is getting generated, that would be club. Okay. So this is all about section 64, subsection 1A, where we talk about clubbing privileges in the hand of minor child. Higher income parent and handmaid would be clubbed, and it would continue to happen for subsequent year until and unless AO change it. Exemption is 1032 में 1500 per annum per child. Section 115 BAC होगा, then 1032 would not be applicable. And exception is no clubbing would happen when the income is generated from manual work, skills, talent, and or the minor is disabled. If skills income leads to further income, then clubbing would happen. All childs are to be included. अब बताओ कोई डाउट है तो? Even if minor is married, then also clubbing provision would apply. Minor income would be included in the income of the parent who has higher income, Devraj. Rahul, I hope your question is answered. Thank you, Mohammed Sohail. सबको clear? Guys, I give you time so that if beach में you study the chapter or maybe you have any question which is relatable, please ask. Yes, minor will pay tax on 5 lakh. That return has to be filed through guardian. उसके लिए वो फाइलिंग ऑफ रिटर्न के लिए अलग प्रोविजन है, नॉट वरी. अब एक केस है गाइस क्रॉस ट्रांसफर का, वो समझाती हूँ एंड देन वी विल मूव टू एचयूएफ. क्रॉस ट्रांसफर का सिंपल सा पार्ट है गाइस. लास्ट 2 टॉपिक्स लेफ्ट, प्लीज फोकस. Now A and B are very smart. A said ki, we know that if we transfer any asset to our spouse, clubbing provisions would apply. So why not do one thing? Let's do like this. As in, I will transfer assets to your wife and you transfer asset to my wife for the same value so that we do not get caught. This is called cross transfers where, one second. So A gives Mrs. B shares and B gives Mrs. A, say, debentures. Mrs. B gets debentures, Mrs. A gets debenture, which will generate interest, almost of equivalent amount, and Mrs. B got shares, which will generate dividend. Okay. So this is called cross transfer, meaning thereby that the two transactions are so interconnected. Cross transfer would happen when the two transactions are so interconnected that they become part of the same transaction in such a way that it can be said That circuitous method was adopted as a device to evade tax, the implication of clubbing provisions would be attracted. मतलब उन्होंने ये सिर्फ इसलिए किया so that किसी को prima facie ना लगे, that prima facie it will not show that transfer has happened, but they did it in a manner that uljan, they made it in a manner so that the tax could be evaded. Because A very well know if I transfer any asset without consideration, and then even if I gift an asset to my wife, clubbing would have happened. Similarly, B very well knows if I give an assets to my wife, clubbing would happen. So what they did, they decided I want to give debentures. B said, I want to give shares. So he did it like that. A ने shares दे दिया B को, B ने debentures दे दिया Mrs. A. Now this interest which Mrs. A is getting would be clubbed in Mr. A's hand, and the dividend which Mrs. B is getting would be clubbed in the hands of B. Whatever the income the recipient would be getting would be clubbed in the hands of the original transferor who has intended all this cross transfer. Okay? This is called cross transfer. Remember this line that where the two transactions are so interconnected that they become part of the same transaction, and such method is done only to evade taxes, then cross transfer are there and clubbing provision would apply. Because otherwise आप clubbing नहीं apply कर सकते. I told you ना clubbing apply करने के लिए either spouse income can be clubbed, son wife income can be clubbed. But spouse income तो है नहीं ना, because इस case में तो Mrs. A को income हो रहा है from the transfer which is coming from B. But this transfer was done only to avoid taxes, and a similar way, another transfer was done to avoid taxes. So they are all part of a common evasion plan, and hence clubbing would apply, even if the transfer is not having a relationship of spouse, etc., with the transferee, but it was done in a manner to evade taxes. Last and a very important part, any property which is transferred to HF, and by property I mean both movable, immovable, that property, ध्यान से सुनना guys, इसमें simple सा है. Many people get confused इसमें partition वाले part में. So any property which an individual, and my favorite person, Mr. X, transfer it to an HUF, ex-HUF को वो transfer करते हैं without consideration or without advocate consideration. Then the income would be clubbed in the hands of individual. So HUF could be if you're transferring any property without consideration or without advocate consideration, the income would be clubbed in the hands of the transferor. Okay. Now, क्या हुआ? HUF has a lot of members. HUF has a lot of members. Now, this property is of who? The properties of HUF. Now, partition happened. Partition हो गया. Suppose there were 10 members, everyone got their share. उसी शेयर का जो इंडिविजुअल ने प्रॉपर्टी दिया था विदाउट कंसिडरेशन. So 10 shares में वो डिवाइड हो गया the same property. Now the question is, clubbing provision would apply not on all, but on the part which Mr. X got. वो तो Mr. X को ही फिर से वो प्रॉपर्टी मिल गई एज पार्टीशन, नो प्रॉब्लम. And what Mrs. X got in partition from HUF. HUF say whatever Mrs. X got from the part of the property which was originally transferred by the individual to HUF without consideration. Now, whatever the spouse of the individual got on partition, उससे whatever income is getting generated would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. Guys, इसमें दो parts हैं HUF के. One part is before partition, which is this part where a person, that is individual, is transferring a property to HUF without consideration. Then in that case, clubbing provisions would apply on the income generating from that property. This is simple. Second part is after partition. After partition of no more, it's a property of HUF. It is a property of different people in part of shares. So whatever the wife gets on partition, उससे whatever income would be generated would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X. कौन सी property का? उस property का which was transferred without consideration, because it is considered कि indirect transfer कर दिया wife को for inadvocate consideration. That's why whatever Mrs. X is getting from that property, which was originally transferred without consideration to HUF, so whatever she gets as an income on partition from that property would be would be clubbed in the hands of Mrs. X. This happens only after partition. Before partition तो ये concept चल रहा है वो property HUF की है. But जब partition हो गया, every member got the share. Whatever the share of that property is received by the spouse, uska income would be clubbed in the hands of Mr. X. ये वाला after partition वाला part most people fail to understand. Please give a look to it. This is all for clubbing provision. जहाँ पे हमने section 60 से we started income from transfer with of transfer of income without transfer of asset, that would be clubbed. Then we saw revocable transfer होगा, uska income would be clubbed. If the revocation is not happening during the lifetime of beneficiary, income would not be clubbed even if it is a revocable transfer. Then we saw that when spouse income would be clubbed, spouse income would be clubbed when it is coming from remuneration and it is from a concern in which assessee has a substantial interest and the spouse is not having that qualification for remuneration. Then we saw that the asset which are transferred without consideration or advocate consideration other than house property to the spouse would, whatever the income which they would generate would be clubbed in the hands of individual. Then we saw if the amount is invested in the business and in the opening capital, the contribution is there, whether in cash or in kind from the assessee, the profits would be clubbed proportionately. Then we saw if any asset is transferred to the assessee to any other person without consideration for the benefit of spouse, the income would be clubbed. Now coming to son's wife, income would be clubbed if any asset, including house property, is transferred to the son's wife without consideration or advocate consideration, then the income from that would be clubbed. Any asset transferred to any other person for the benefit of son's wife, income from that asset would be clubbed. Any amount invested in the business of son's wife, income from which is profit from that business would be clubbed, provided there was a capital contribution from the assessee who is father-in-law or mother-in-law in the opening capital. Similarly, minor ka all incomes are clubbed with an exemption under section 1032. Income which is not clubbed is the income of like manual work, skills, talent, etc. And if the person is disabled, no income would be clubbed. And last, we saw HUF ko if you will transfer anything without consideration, income would be clubbed. It would be clubbed till the time HUF is there and no partition has happened. Once the partition happens, now everyone get the shares. So whatever the share wife gets from that property, that would be income from that property, the share would be clubbed. Simple. Income includes losses. If incomes are clubbed, losses are also to be clubbed. Capital gain is also to be clubbed. Cross gifts the part we also saw. So this is all clubbing. बहुत फास्ट क्विक रिवीजन कर लिया मैंने. अब बताओ कुछ और प्रॉब्लम है तो. आई नो मिस्टर एक्स इज माय फेवरेट. इफ द गार्डियन का वो लीगल चाइल्ड बन जाता है, क्लबिंग वुड हैपन. मेजर है पेरेंट्स डिसेबल्ड, पेरेंट्स आर डेड एंड एनी का. हे राम, यू गाइस, I am shocked that these questions are asked by intermediate students. Okay. गिफ्टिंग प्रोविजंस का रिसिपिएंट के हैंड पे टैक्सेबल होंगे. गिफ्टिंग प्रोविजन ऑब्वियसली आर फॉर द एसेट व्हिच इज बीइंग ट्रांसफर. यहाँ पे वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इनकम व्हिच इज गेटिंग जनरेटेड. सो सपोज आई एम ट्रांसफरिंग एन एसेट टू एनी अदर पर्सन विदाउट कंसिडरेशन. gifting provision in the hands of recipient definitely gone. But now the income which is getting generated, uska clubbing hoga ya nahi, that is to be discussed. And wo hoga if it is without consideration and for the benefit of either spouse or for the benefit of son's wife. That's it. If it is for the benefit of any other person other than spouse or son's wife, clubbing would not happen. जो एक्ट में लिखा है, only to that extent clubbing would happen. एचयूएफ का शेयर, सी माइनर को तो कोई भी इनकम जनरेट होगा वो टैक्सेबल होगा ही होगा इन दी हैंड, एज ए क्लब होगा ही होगा इन दी हैंड्स ऑफ द हायर इनकम पेरेंट. अब वो चाहे जिस मर्जी रूट से इट कम्स. ओके. चाइल्ड मेजर है तो इनकम इज नॉट टू बी क्लब. क्लबिंग प्रोविजन हैपेंस ओनली टिल द टाइम ऑफ चाइल्ड इज अ माइनर. गाइस, किसी को भी पार्टीशन शेयर मिल रहा हो, यहाँ पे सिर्फ इतना बात हुआ है, इफ द स्पाउस का शेयर वुड बी क्लब, दैट्स इट. If maybe everyone would might be getting share, but spouse के share का income would be clubbed. Section 18 ये तो reduction का section है ना नागराजू. Why you are mixing it with clubbing का section? अगर if Nas Praveen, if the minor married daughter is there, the income would be clubbed in the hand of the parents. But obviously, if spouse, well, in relationships, if she's sending anything getting from the SSE, where SSE is the transfer, as in the spouse is the transfer, तब वो वाले provision लगेगा. Don't go blindly. Pick up case by case and then see. Guys, कोई और doubt? Can we take the break now and then before after break we'll start off with set off and carry forward. Extremely simple, easy chapter. Take 1 more minute. If there's any doubt, just let me know. Yes, if a person is disabled, the income earned by the minor would not be clubbed. Minor का खुद का income file होगा. Because वहां पे ये clear है कि the person is disabled, maybe whatever he is getting is not from the intention of evading tax, but from the intention of his condition. So that's why clubbing does not apply. क्लबिंग में एक चीज याद रखना, वॉट एवर इज रिटन इन द एक्ट ओनली टू दैट एक्सटेंट क्लबिंग वुड अप्लाई. देयर कैन बी विजन प्रोविजन एक्सेट्रा, बट सेक्शन 64 would not get attract on those provisions. Okay, so now quickly let's take a break, and after break we'll pick up the chapter set and carry forward. Thank you. So, welcome back, guys. And now I hope everyone had something to eat. Now we'll be back and we'll be doing our set off and carry forward chapter. But before that, I believe there was some doubt for clubbing provisions. Okay. If see, Shivana, if again and again I'm saying, if a spouse has qualifications for which she's getting the remuneration from a concern in which the SSC has substantial interest, there would no clubbing provisions. If you have qualifications, so then it's a genuine case. Obviously, there is no problem that if you're working in your uh, spouse concern. The problem is when you are not qualified and still getting the salary. Okay. So then clubbing provisions would only be applicable if you're not qualified. If you're qualified, no clubbing provisions. If minor's wife is also a minor, एक तो इतने confusing provisions क्यों लेके आ रहे हो खुद को confuse करने के लिए, but no problem, Rito. So if a minor's wife is also minor and the parent of minor transfer assets without consideration, then it will be clubbed with minus parent or minus wife parent. Really, matlab really, what you are saying, there is A and B. Okay, A and B both are minor. Now, if the father-in-law has made the transfer, if you're saying it like that, whether of an asset to the son's wife, who is the minor, then clubbing provisions would happen in the hands of father. See, it's not that the entire income has to be clubbed. Only the income which are coming from the respective thing has to be clubbed. So, if the father-in-law of a minor person is transferring the asset to minor's wife, who is also minor, then in that case, father-in-law में clubbing provisions लगेंगे. Simple. See guys, minor लोगों के भी clubbing father में होती है. But हाँ, if any specific provision is happening, specific provision कौन सा हो गया? Transfer of asset from father-in-law or transfer of asset from spouse without consideration. तो वो asset जो spouse से आया, वो spouse में club होगा. What the asset is coming from father-in-law, उसका income father-in-law में club होगा. Simple. ठीक है. Now please everyone give me a green thumbs up and so that we can, as in a green jhanda, that now we can move to our set off and carry forward wala chapter. Quickly. If is it clear or not? Thank you so much, everyone. Perfect. Vishali, only 50,000. Thank you so much, guys. Now, set off and carry forward, बहुत important है. Let's start chapter 5. So, the chapter name is Aggregation of Income, Set Off and Carry Forward. So, सबसे पहले before, and I'm saying it again and again, Set Off and Carry Forward. So, सबसे पहले let's focus on the small part, which is aggregation of income. Aggregation का क्या मतलब होता है? Club, not club, actually, not, I'll not use the word club. Total करना, aggregate करना, ठीक है? So, aggregation of income means when you have to include in the total income of the SSE all those income which we discussed as income to be included in the total income of SSE as deemed income, which were in relation to unexplained assets, unexplained income, unexplained investment, unexplained expenditure. वो वाला सब income मिला के one has to consider the total income. This is the concept of aggregation of income. Simple. और कुछ ऐसा concept नहीं है. ये ना हो कि कल को यूज से कि मैम ने तो मेन चीज पढ़ाई ही नहीं. No. Now, let's focus on the concept of set off and carry forward. Set off and carry forward, very, very, very important chapter again. Because ये ना पता है क्या है guys, people tend to leave these chapters, these would not come. But these chapters are the small holes which are filled in to get the complete answer correctly. So even if they are relatively easy, but one should at least give a good quick look to it. Okay. So now coming to set off and carry forward. What do you mean by set off and carry forward? Set off means adjustment. Carry forward means अगले साल. ठीक है, द नेक्स्ट ईयर. अब इसको हाउ डू आई एक्सप्लेन टू यू simply. A person can have income under various head, number one, and under the same head a person can have income from different sources. ठीक है, सेम हेड में भी मल्टीपल सोर्सेज हो सकते हैं. इफ आई टॉक अबाउट हाउस प्रॉपर्टी, आई कैन हैव इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 1, इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 2, इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 3. Similarly, I can have house property income from multiple different house properties and say business income also. So this can happen. अब एक बात बताओ, if in ever in life when we get in a situation of loss, what do we do? First we ask it within the same house, we ask for help within the same house. Correct? अब घर पे भी someone has to help or someone has money to help, they help. But if we do not get money, we do not get any help, we go to other people, as in other house, other one to ask for. Okay, वहां पे भी someone would help, someone would have a restriction, and someone would say, okay, I can adjust only up to this amount. Correct? उसके बाद what will happen? We understand it and we leave it up to the time and we take it to the next time. Similarly, in set off and carry forward of incomes also, this happens. When you have any losses in the year of occurrence, that is when they are incurred, first of all, you will set it off. अब set it off कैसे करोगे? फर्स्ट स्टेप वुड बी टू मेक इंट्रा हेड एडजस्टमेंट. जैसे मैंने आपको कहा अपने घर से पूछते हो वैसे ही सेम हेड एडजस्टमेंट्स करोगे अंडर द सेम हेड्स. देन yani if I'm talking about house property loss from one house property, first it should be adjusted with house property income. First it should be adjusted with house property income, say income 1, income 2, etc. house property का. ठीक है, if house property पे sufficiently income नहीं है, what will I do? Step 2 would be inter head adjustment. So intra head adjustment होगा सबसे पहले and then inter head. इंट्रा हेड मतलब विद इन द सेम हेड. इंट्रा स्कूल कॉम्पिटिशन विद इन द सेम स्कूल. इंटर स्कूल मतलब बिटवीन डिफरेंट स्कूल. सो सबसे पहले इंट्रा हेड सेम. सबसे पहले यू विल डू द एडजस्टमेंट विद इन द सेम हेड. Then, if there is not sufficient income, still there are losses, you will do the adjustment with the different heads. उसके बाद भी if something is left, it is carry forward to next year and will be adjusted in the same head. This is the rule. उसमें आप बाकी heads के पास नहीं जाओगे. So can I say in the year when the loss is incurred, it can be adjusted first in the same head and then with other heads. And in the subsequent year, the same loss which is carry forward, उसको अगले साल carry forward कर लिया, would be adjusted only under the same head, not with other heads. Okay. अब हर एक का restriction है. Restriction है मतलब inter-head adjustment has some restrictions, inter-head adjustment has some restrictions, and then ultimately carry forward has certain time limits. A person cannot say, I don't want to adjust the loss. Let's carry forward it. No, first he has to go with the first, second step. Then only he can carry forward it. It's not a choice to not to not set off. It's not a choice to not set off. You have to make first step, then you have to go to second step. Again, similarly, I cannot go, I have a house property 1 ka loss, I will adjust it with my business income. No, first you have to adjust it with the same head. Then only you can go with the different heads. So this rule has to be followed. जिस साल loss incur हुआ उस साल का I'm talking about the rules, these rules. Once it is carry forwarded with the same head only. Got it? Okay. Now, first thing, section 70 talks about interhead adjustment. कि सिंपल है, अगर मेरे पास हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 1 का लॉस है, हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 2 का लॉस है, हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 3 का इनकम है. So first of all, I will adjust here. This is suppose 2 lakhs. This is suppose 9 lakhs का income, and suppose house property 3 का losses of 3 lakhs. So first I will adjust the losses from the same head. So this can be adjusted. My net income from house property, guys, would be 4 lakh. Simple. But कुछ restrictions हैं that within same head B, I cannot make the adjustment. I cannot make the adjustment. For example, if I talk about long-term capital loss, अब capital gain में guys, capital gain में guys दो type के gains होते हैं, you know, LTCG and STCG. Okay, LTCG and STCG. Similarly, losses भी can be LTCL and STCL. बट जो लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल लॉस है ना, उसको यू कैन एडजस्ट ओनली विद लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन. उसको यू कैन नॉट एडजस्ट विद शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन. द लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल लॉस कैन बी सेट ऑफ ओनली विद लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन. अगर suppose I have a long term capital loss of 3 lakhs, I have a short term capital gain of 1 lakh, I cannot adjust it. I cannot adjust it. 3 lakhs would be carry forwarded. 3 lakhs would be carry forwarded. Simple सा है. अगर उसका इंटर हेड का रिस्ट्रिक्शन है तो ऑब्वियसली इंटर हेड का भी रिस्ट्रिक्शन होगा. बट वाइसी वर्सा करते हैं. इफ आई हैव अ शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल लॉस of 3 lakhs and I have a long term capital gain of whatever rate. Rates का matter नहीं करता. Long term capital gain of 1 lakh. Then what will happen? Can I adjust it? Yes, I can adjust it. Then the net result would be short term capital loss of 2 lakh. That can be adjusted. So restriction is only from long term capital loss, not to be adjusted with any other gain except long term gain. Similarly, speculation loss. Speculative business होता है, correct? Speculative business में जो loss होता है वो speculative income से adjust होता है. Even if I have other incomes which are taxed under the heads PGBP, if I have business from say textile business, I have income from say manufacturing business, but speculation loss would not be adjusted with other business income. Comparatively, other business income का loss can be adjusted with speculative income. Got it? So restrictions सिर्फ इन लॉस को एडजस्ट करने के, इनकी इनकम से इफ एनी एडजस्टमेंट कैन हैपन, दैट इज अलाउड. दैट इज टोटली अलाउड. नेक्स्ट इज लॉस फ्रॉम ओनिंग एंड मेंटेनिंग रेस हॉर्सेस. बस कैजुअल इनकम में जैसे आपका गैम्बलिंग आ गया, लॉटरी आ गया, कार्ड गेम्स आ गया, उसमें तो देयर इज नेवर लॉसेस. दैट हैज द विनिंग हैज टू बी टैक्स्ड एट फ्लैट रेट ऑफ 30%. बट व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट ओनिंग एंड मेंटेनिंग रेस हॉर्सेस, तो जो मेंटेनिंग का एक्सपेंडिचर होता है दैट इज अलाउड, करेक्ट? सो इफ दैट इज रिजल्टिंग इन लॉस, इट हैज टू बी एडजस्टेड ओनली विद द इनकम ऑफ ओनिंग एंड मेंटेनिंग रेस हॉर्सेस. सिमिलरली लॉस फ्रॉम स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस. स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस कौन सा होता है? जो सेक्शन 35 AD में आते हैं गाइस. 35 AD में all the specified business comes, right? So if you are a person not having 115 BAC, so you can claim 35 AD का deduction. Now 35 AD way, whatever losses are resulting, and naturally it would result at the beginning of the year. Why? Because capital expenditure is allowed. So naturally, if capital expenditure is allowed, there would be a lot of losses, and the losses of those specified business can only be adjusted with the profit of specified business. So what are the four main restrictions? First is speculative business losses. Specified business losses can only be adjusted with the respective income, that is speculative income and specified business income. Long-term capital gain can only be adjusted with long-term capital loss can only be adjusted with long-term capital gain, and loss from owning and maintaining racehorses can be set off against income from owning and maintaining racehorses only. Bas. Exempt income पे loss नहीं allowed होगा, like agricultural income पे agricultural loss को उसको you will not set off. So once intra-head adjustment is done, next step is to do inter-head adjustment. अब मतलब head to head हमें देखना है कि क्या restrictions है in a complete sense. So first of all, section 70 talks about intra-head adjustment. Section 71 talks about inter-head adjustment. So सबसे पहले adjustment is same previous year में loss हो रहा है guys. ये बार-बार मैं बोल रही हूँ. तो जो रिस्ट्रिक्शन ऑफ इंट्रा हेड है वो तो रहेगी मतलब स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस लॉस हो गया इन जनरल, लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल लॉस हो गया, और स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस स्पेक्युलेटिव लॉस हो गया, या मेंटेनिंग रेस हॉर्सेस वाला लॉस हो गया, और मेरा स्पेक्युलेटिव बिजनेस का, ये जो जिसपे ऑलरेडी इंटर हेड रिस्ट्रिक्शन है, तो नेचुरली इंटर हेड रिस्ट्रिक्शन वुड आल्सो अप्लाई. दैट मींस these losses cannot be adjusted with any other head also. Naturally, they are not allowed to be adjusted with any other source under the same head. So वो किसी और हेड से क्यों अलाउ होगा, करेक्ट? सिमिलरली, उसके अलावा व्हाट आर द रिस्ट्रिक्शन? उसके अलावा शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल लॉस का, you know, it can be adjusted with long term capital gain, but short term capital loss can only be adjusted with capital gain income. That means capital losses cannot be adjusted with any other income. Can I conclude? Capital losses cannot be adjusted with any other income. But again, capital gain can be adjusted with losses, but capital losses cannot be adjusted with any other income, because short term capital loss का तो long term capital loss only with long term capital gain. अब बचा short term capital loss, that can be adjusted with long term capital gain or short term capital gain. शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन के लिए भी वो एडजस्ट हो सकते हैं, एंड लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन के लिए भी, बट कैनॉट बी एडजस्टेड फ्रॉम एनी अदर हेड. दिस लॉन्ग शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल लॉस ओनली विद शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन and long-term capital gain. Similarly, loss from business, as in PGBP, cannot be adjusted with salaries. Cannot be set off with salaries. हाउस प्रॉपर्टी से यू कैन सेट ऑफ पीजीबीपी का इनकम, अदर सोर्सेज से यू कैन सेट ऑफ पीजीबीपी का लॉस, कैपिटल गेन से यू कैन सेट ऑफ पीजीबीपी का लॉस, बट नॉट फ्रॉम सैलरी. सो इवन इफ आई हैव सैलरीज इन करोर्स एंड आई हैव लॉसेस ऑफ बिजनेस इन लैक्स, स्टिल आई कैन नॉट सेट ऑफ. फिर लास्ट रिस्ट्रिक्शन जो यहाँ पे है इज ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी. गाइस, अगर हाउस प्रॉपर्टी में लॉस होता है, the maximum loss which can be adjusted with other income is to 2 lakhs. ये 2 lakhs is different from self-occupied वाला limit. The maximum loss which can be adjusted with any other income is up to 2 lakhs. मैम मतलब, so suppose let's see, I have house property, letter property 1. I have letter property 2. Letter property 1 has an income of say 6 lakhs, and letter property 2 has a loss of say, first example में let's take it 4 lakhs. Okay. So this loss can be easily adjusted with house property within the same head. So आपका net income आ गया 2 lakhs. No problem. Now next example लेते हैं. Letter property का income is 6 lakhs. Letter property का loss is 9 lakhs. Total loss from house property कितना आ गया guys? 3 lakhs. अब ये मैं कहीं पे भी एडजस्ट करूं, बिजनेस से करूं, सैलरी से करूं, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, बट द मैक्सिमम आई कैन एडजस्ट इज 2 lakhs. The maximum I can adjust is 2 lakhs, even if there are a lot of salary there, a lot of business income there. Maximum I can adjust is 2 lakhs. 1 lakh naturally has to be carried forwarded. 1 lakh would be carried forwarded, and 2 lakhs would be adjusted if they are requisite incomes. Okay, so house property loss from other head cannot be adjusted for more than 2 lakhs. So what are the 5 restrictions, or what are the restrictions under section 71? एक तो वही restrictions होंगे जो हम इसको ऐसे याद करने से better मुझे ये लगता है. Obviously, the intra-head adjustments which are there would obviously apply on the inter-head adjustments also. So what cannot be adjusted within the same house cannot go and be adjusted with other head. Simple. Similarly, short-term capital loss can only be adjusted with short-term capital gain and long-term capital gain. Concluding, losses from capital assets cannot be adjusted with any other head. Business losses cannot be adjusted with salary at all, and house property, the loss can be adjusted only up to the only up to 2 lakhs, only up to 2 lakhs from any other head. Simple. So अगर इसी basis पे अब आप बोलोगे कि मैम, if I have suppose what can be the order? First, do I have to set it off with salary? Then do I have to set it off with the other sources? No, the loss you can set off in any order. As in, let's take an example. I have PGBP का loss of 3 lakhs. Okay. Now I have house property income of 2 lakhs. I have other sources income of 4 lakhs. It is up to me whether I want to adjust it with other sources or whether I want to adjust it with house property or whether I want to adjust it in whatever manner. It is totally up to me. What I have to remember are the restrictions given in section 1771. No other thing has to be taken care of. But obviously, I cannot adjust it with salary even if I have a income under the head salary. तो वो 3 लाख 2 लाख मैं हाउस प्रॉपर्टी से करूँ 1 लाख अदर सोर्सेज से करूँ नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम या सारा अदर सोर्सेज से करूँ नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम इट इज अप टू मी ओनली थिंग आई हैव टू रिमेंबर दैट आई डू नॉट हैव टू क्रॉस द लेजिटिमेट कंडीशंस व्हिच आर देयर एक बार सेक्शन 70-71 में कोई डाउट है गाइस Rajveer, I have no answer to this. You have to ask the law teacher on it. कोई question? Perfect. Congratulations, Santosh. Srinivasa, yeah, 70s intra head adjustment. इंटर सोर्स बोलोगे या इंट्रा हेड बोलोगे इंट्रा मतलब विद इन द सेम हेड इंटर सोर्स मतलब डिफरेंट सोर्सेस विद इन द सेम हेड मैम सेट ऑफ क्लब्ड इनकम से कर सकते हैं ये क्लबिंग प्रोविजन के बाद आप पहले क्लबिंग होता है फिर सेट ऑफ होता है तभी तो चैप्टर वैसे की है अनएक्सप्लेन इनकम से गैम्बलिंग इनकम से वर्चुअल डिजिटल एसेट से अ, इन सब से यू कैन नॉट एडजस्ट एनी लॉसेस और कोई डाउट गाइस पूछो पूछो Loss from house property can be set off from capital gain and salary, correct? Loss from house property is 5 lakh, 2 can be set off and 3 can be carry forward, correct? श्रीनिवासन इंटर सोर्स लिखा है इंट्रा हेड इज इक्वल टू इंटर सोर्स एक हेड में डिफरेंट सोर्सेज होते हैं तो डिफरेंट सोर्सेज के एक साथ एडजस्टमेंट होने को इंटर सोर्स कहेंगे बट इट इज हैपनिंग विद इन द सेम हेड तो यहाँ से इंट्रा हेड बोलो या इंटर सोर्स बोलो एक ही बात है प्रोविजन इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ 115 बीएसई मतलब सेट ऑफ कैरी फॉरवर्ड में सी जो चीजें are not allowed under 115 BSc. Naturally, unka set off and carry forward are not allowed under section 115 BSc. But at this stage, I will not explain the complete 115 BSc. Anmol, is there any doubt? Okay. Now we move to अब एक एक करके. Now that we have already incurred the loss. Now what will happen if there is no income to adjust? Then you carry forward it. Then you carry forward it. So loss under the head house property is carry forwarded. First after interhead adjustment and intrahead adjustment, it is carry forwarded. सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी से लॉस अगर आ रहा है गाइस 115 बीएससी में, तो वो अलाउड ही नहीं है एट द फर्स्ट प्लेस। तो उसको आप एडजस्ट कैसे करोगे? हाउ विल यू एडजस्ट इट? And the total income of the assessee who has opted for concessional tax regime under Section 115 BAC is computed without set off of any loss from the head income from house property with any other head of income. वहां पे उसको ये रिस्ट्रिक्शन है। नाउ कैरी फॉरवर्ड करते, कैरी फॉरवर्ड ऑफ लॉसेस का अभी तक सेक्शन 70 में वी सॉ what is allowed and what are the restrictions for intra-head adjustment. Section 71 में we saw what are the restrictions on inter-head adjustment. Now कैरी फॉरवर्ड ऑफ लॉसेस में हर एक हेड का डिफरेंट, हर एक इनकम का डिफरेंट डिफरेंट सेक्शन है। एवरी इनकम हैज डिफरेंट डिफरेंट सेक्शन। 1 सेकेंड। करेक्ट, अभी कैरी फॉरवर्ड एंड वो मैं करवाऊंगी। Ma'am, page 5.6 per item, I see first point says loss under any other head except capital gain can be set off against any other income. But point says, हाँ तो वो exceptions है ना बाबा। एक जनरल रूल है कि आप लॉस को एडजस्ट कर सकते हो, बट उसके बाद अलग अलग रिस्ट्रिक्शंस है। लाइक 2 लाख से ज्यादा हाउस प्रॉपर्टी लॉस नहीं, यू कैन नॉट रिस्ट्रिक्ट समवन। सिमिलरली बिजनेस लॉस को यू कैन नॉट एडजस्ट विद सैलरी, but business loss so you can adjust with capital gain. Business loss so you can adjust with house property. There is no problem. Correct guys, अभी सब कैरी फॉरवर्ड पे आ गए हो, प्लीज अब फोकस ना। ज्यादा सिंपल सा है, बहुत इजी ब्रीजी है ना, प्लीज लेट्स फोकस। फोकस करिए प्लीज। थैंक यू सो मच। अब we can prepare it like a, please everyone with me, let's prepare it in a form of notes. Once a loss is carried forward, उसका provision are there under separate section. Section 71B है, section 72 है, 73A है, etc. etc. Now, once the loss is carried forward, it would be adjusted under the same head only. I'm not saying under the same source, I'm saying under the same head. Okay, so section 71B talks about house property loss. House property loss, guys, अगर आप 115 BAC दे रहे हो, you cannot adjust with any other income. You have to carry it forward. If you're not opting for 115 BAC, you can adjust only up to the maximum extent of 2 lakhs. Got it? Simple. और अगर आप 115 BAC ले रहे हो, that means if you're opting for 115 BAC, that means you will have only losses from house property which is let out, because from self-occupied the losses are not allowed. Okay. Now let's focus on the carry forward part. Once you have a house property loss, it can be carry forwarded to the, it can be adjusted first with house property income only. It can be adjusted with house property income only. Yani next year, with whatever the loss gets carry forwarded, like in an example, 5 lakh ka loss है, 2 lakh can be adjusted, 3 lakh would be carry forwarded. The loss which is carry forwarded would become the brought forward loss of the next year. इसको carry forward किया, वो brought forward बन गया accounts का concept. Then it would be adjusted only with house property income for the maximum period of 8 years. Maximum period of 8 years from occurrence. Occurrence से 8 साल तक ही I can adjust it. And do I have to file the return? Belated return इसमें allowed होगी? Yes. Because now for carry forwarding, you have to remember to carry forward any loss, you have to file the return within due date. If you will not file the return within due date, you cannot carry forward that loss. But house property loss and unabsorbed depreciation is one such are two such losses which can be carried forward even by filing belated return, which can be carried forward even by filing belated return. So I can say whether return is mandatory to carry forward, the answer is no. But for others, the return is mandatory for the losses to carry forward. ठीक है? अब for example, अभी मैं सिर्फ एक एग्जांपल लूंगी. This you can understand for other part also. ईयर वन की बात करते हैं, ठीक है? ईयर वन में सेम प्रीवियस ईयर 2021 में let's talk about previous year 21-22. Okay, 21-22. I have salary income of 4 lakhs. House property 1 say loss है of 3 lakhs. House property 2 से भी लॉस है, दोनों लेट आउट है. आई एम नॉट ऑप्टिंग फॉर 115 BAC. ओके, हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 2 से भी लॉस है ऑफ से 2,80,000. Okay, now the maximum loss which can be adjusted with salary, guys, is what? Is 2 lakhs. So 2 lakhs, I'll adjust. My total income comes to 2 lakhs, no problem. But what are the losses which would be carried forward? The total loss which would be carried forward is 3,80,000. Got it? So अब next year में आ गए हम. Now this 3,80,000 would be carried forwarded and would be adjusted only with loss, only with income under the head house property. Number one. Number two, this 380 can be carried forwarded only up to the maximum of 8 assessment years. Yani 22, 23, 23, 24 and so on up to total 8. Okay. Now in previous year 20 to 23. Let's talk about that. Now the salary income is 5 lakhs. But there is house property once a loss of 4 lakhs. House property 2 say there is an income of say 1 lakh. Okay. Now what will I do? First, will I adjust this 3,80,000 with 1? No. First preference always has to be given to the current year loss. So current year loss for just किया, so net loss 3 lakh का हुआ, ठीक है? Then from this 3 lakh, I can adjust maximum 2 lakhs from the 5 lakh salary. Correct? So the net income comes to 3 lakh. What about, ma'am, this 380? Now this 380 would be carry forwarded. अब वो carry forward में क्या होगा, guys? Total losses which would be carry forward is 380 for previous year 21-22 and 1 lakh for previous year 22-23. Got it? Now, next year, you will understand this example. It would be easier to understand all the types of incomes and losses. Okay. Now, next year, that is in previous year 23-24. Salary 6 lakhs. House property 1 से loss आया of 1 lakh. House property 2 से loss income आया of 4 lakhs. Now current year का पहले adjust किया 3 lakhs income बचा positive. Now from this 3 lakh, first I will adjust the loss of the earliest previous year. Why? Because it will get lapsed first. Correct? इसका 8 years start हो गया यहाँ से. इसका 8 years would start from the coming year. So first I will adjust the loss of 380. So maximum adjusted loss हो गया which for previous year 21-22. Correct? So यहाँ पे nothing is there. Total income comes to 6 lakhs. Now in the carry forward segment, what do I have? In the carry forward segment, now I have 21-22 का loss of 80,000, 3 lakh is adjusted, and 22-23 का loss of 1 lakh. ठीक है? Simple. अब समझ आया how this mechanism of carry forward and set off works, and this is for every carry forward mechanism except for 2 lakh का restrictions. First preference to current year loss has to be given, then preference to the brought forward losses have to be given, and उसमें भी जो सबसे पुराना है that has to be set off. Every year for current year losses, you will take care of intra-head and inter-head adjustment. And when it comes to carry forward, you will go to the respective section. जैसे section 71B is for house property loss. एक बार इसको देखो and let me know if there's any doubt. 44AD में लॉस कैसे दिखाते हो गाइस? 44AD तो इनकम का सेक्शन है ना, अगर आप 44AD नहीं फॉलो करते तो नॉर्मल बिजनेस दिखाते हो. ये क्वेश्चन से सेट ऑफ कैरी फॉरवर्ड समझ आया. अब मैं प्रोविजंस पे आऊंगी फटाफट से. ओके, कोई डाउट है? यस, नो, ओके, नॉट ओके? So again and again, I'm saying once the losses are carried forward, it can be adjusted only with the respective heads. जैसे house property, if carry forwarded, can only be adjusted with house property income, and can be the loss can be carried forwarded for maximum of 8 years. ठीक है, please do this question अभी. Then next is carry forward of business losses. A business losses maybe there are three parts: specified business loss, speculative business loss, and guys, normal business loss. साथ में please ध्यान से. Okay, so now specified business losses, and section 72 talks about normal business losses. 73 talks about specified business losses, and 73A talks about speculative business losses. Sorry, specific 3A is about speculative. 73, हाँ ठीक है, हाँ. 73 is for speculative. 73A is for specified. So normal business loss again can be carried forwarded and adjusted with normal business income only, because speculative gain से कर सकते हो, yes कर सकते हो, no problem in that. Speculative losses can be adjusted with speculative income only, and specified business losses can be adjusted with only specified business. Simple. इसमें normal business loss can be adjusted with specified business income, speculative business income, normal business income, does not matter. Any business income. But obviously speculative loss में जहाँ intra head restrictions है, inter head restrictions है, carry forward में भी the same restrictions happens. ठीक है. But what about the time period? For how many years the losses can be carried forwarded? Normal business loss for the maximum period of 8 years. Return filing is mandatory. Speculative business loss for the maximum period of 4 years from the incurrence. Return filing is mandatory. आज loss हुआ, next 4 years तक you can adjust it. उसके बाद it would get lapse. Specified business loss का there is no time limit. You can adjust it for as long many years as you want to, but only with specified business income. Return filing is mandatory. Got it? कोई doubt? But yes, obviously the person who has incurred the loss can only adjust it. इसमें 35AD में याद रखना, अगर आपका कोई स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस को ऑलरेडी लॉस चल रहा है एंड यू ऑप्टेड 115 BAC, दैट लॉस वुड लैप्स. Next is Loss under the head capital gain. मैम डिसकंटिन्यूड बिजनेस का लॉस भी कैरी फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हैं, गेस कर सकते हैं। सेसी सेम हो, डिसकंटिन्यूड बिजनेस का भी लॉस कैरी फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हो, उसको किसी और बिजनेस से यू कैन एडजस्ट, नो प्रॉब्लम ऑन दैट। नेक्स्ट इज कैपिटल गेन। कैपिटल गेन में भी गाइस सेक्शन 74 कम्स इनटू पिक्चर। सेक्शन 74 में भी सेम, शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल लॉस वंस कैरी फॉरवर्डेड कैन बी एडजस्टेड विद शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन और लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन, but long-term capital loss once carry forwarded would only be adjusted with long-term capital gain. दोनों का 8 years is the time period and return filing is mandatory. Next is section 74A. सब कुछ सेम लिखा हुआ है, कुछ भी मैंने चेंज नहीं किया हुआ। Section 74A talks about losses from owning and maintaining race horses. इसमें भी once carry forwarded can only be adjusted with the income from maintaining race horses. मैक्सिमम 4 years, मैक्सिमम 4 years। तो 4 years वाला कौन सा है? एक स्पेक्युलेटिव बिजनेस है एंड वन इज ओनिंग एंड मेंटेनिंग रिसोर्सेज। बाकी सब में 8 years है, स्पेसिफाइड बिजनेस में अनडिफाइंड लिमिट है। ठीक है, एंड लास्ट इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एंड विच इज नॉट इन द पार्ट ऑफ योर set of carry forward chapter but is a part of your section 32, which is depreciation, unabsorbed depreciation. Any unabsorbed depreciation can be carry forwarded for indefinite period. बिजनेस लॉस को अलग कंप्यूट होता है, अनअब्सॉर्ब डेप्रिसिएशन अलग कंप्यूट होता है। So suppose there is a profit of 8 lakhs and there is depreciation of, suppose there is a loss of 8 lakhs and there is a let's make it like this. Suppose there is a gross profit of 9 lakhs, ठीक है, there is depreciation of 6 lakhs and there is other expenses of 4 lakhs or make it 8 lakhs, ठीक है। So you will say, naturally you will have an instinct and you will say it is total, ma'am, total losses are there of 5 lakhs, correct? Total business losses of 5 lakhs, you will say it like this. Ma'am, total business losses of 5 lakhs. No, for the income tax part, you have to say it like that. The total and the losses are not of 5 lakhs. There is only unabsorbed depreciation, which is of 5 lakhs, which is being carried forwarded. Which is being carried forwarded. ये जो है ये unabsorbed depreciation की वजह से है, because depreciation was so much, the losses and the gains were not able to match it. Now suppose the other expenses is of, instead of 8, let's make it 11 lakhs. Then in that case, you will say, you will have an extent and you will say, ma'am, total losses from business is 8 lakhs. I will say no. It again has to be qualified as different parts. उसको divide करना है. You will not say कि total business losses are of ma'am 8 lakhs. No, you will not say it like that. I will say it like कि unabsorbed depreciation is of 6 lakhs and 2 lakhs is for business losses. ठीक है. Now unabsorbed depreciation is carried forward for indefinite period. It is carried forward for indefinite period and also it can be adjusted even after carry forward with any head. जैसे business loss after carry forward can only be adjusted with business head of income, but unabsorbed depreciation can be carry forwarded and adjusted with any head as in any income except salary. Salary से कभी नहीं होगा, उसके अलावा सबसे adjust होगा, ठीक है, for indefinite period. And here also return filing is not mandatory to carry forwarded. बस simple. So section 71B talks about house property loss can be adjusted only with house property income, maximum up to 8 years. Return filing not mandatory. Normal business income with any business income Normal business loss with any business income, maximum up to 8 years, return filing is mandatory. Speculative business only with speculative income, maximum period 4 years. Return filing mandatory. Specified business only with specified business loss only with specified business income. Return filing is not mandatory. No, it is mandatory, but there is no time limit. Short-term capital loss with long-term or short-term gains. Long-term capital loss only with long-term gains. Return filing is mandatory. Maximum 8 years. Horses and maintaining owning and maintaining resources, 74A section, maximum up to 4 years can be carried forward and be adjusted only with the income of owning and maintaining resources. Return filing is mandatory. And unabsorbed depreciation only can be carried forwarded for indefinite period, no limit. No need to file the return, also mandatory within time, and can be carried forwarded and be adjusted with any head of income except salary. Exempt income pay losses would not be allowed. Losses from lottery, card game, etc. are not allowed. Brought forward losses of discontinued business can be set off. Order of set off में सबसे पहले current year loss, then brought forward loss of businesses, and then unabsorbed depreciation, because unabsorbed depreciation can be carried forwarded for indefinite period. Okay. सबसे पहले करंट ईयर लॉसेस को ही प्रेफरेंस दी जाएगी. तो दिस इज ऑल अबाउट लॉसेस ऑफ कैरी फॉरवर्डिंग एंड सेटिंग इट ऑफ. फ्रॉम माय साइड कोई डाउट है गाइस, प्लीज बता दो. आई बी वेरी हैप्पी टू टेक इट अप. ऑल दीज आर गिवन इन द समरी टू. तनु कहाँ पे डाउट है, प्लीज बताओ. Loss from depreciation can be carry forwarded. See, specified business में guys, depreciation होता नहीं है because सारे capital expenditure आप claim कर लेते हो. Speculative businesses more on trading shares, वहाँ पे भी depreciation नहीं आता. Generally, unabsorbed depreciation from any particular business can be carry forwarded for unlimited time. Srinivasan, I'm sorry, but two topics were to be covered, and there are good thoda sa to be length discuss topic. If in case you want, you practice all the questions which are available. If in case you want me to do it, I'll do it in the next class. Don't worry. Yes, whenever you will put in Manohar, or whenever you will put in these incomes and the expenses, automatically the business will show that this is the loss and this is the unabsorbed depreciation. Srinivasan, from my side, I did a self-made practical question to make you understand. कहीं पे भी doubt आएगा, just let me know. Yes, to carry forward of losses, you have to file the return every year. The logic is simple because a person salary income, see PGBP losses cannot be verified until and unless there is audit. I have a salary income of 15 lakhs. I will show that I have PGBP losses of 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs. अब वो मैं डिक्लेयर कर दूं, how will they would take it, right? Until unless audit is done. So salary, which is a fully taxable, simply computed income, उसको we cannot set it off with business losses. And Mol, I've already answered, done. कोई और doubt है guys? Sure, can we wrap up? Perfect. Do not worry, I'm not going anywhere. We'll be coming up and meeting you in the next year. So please do this particular chapter. It can be easily wrapped up. Abhi break lo. Easily it can be wrapped up. Both the chapters can be wrapped up in 1 hour. Just do them so that it gets stuck in your mind. And if any question arises, you can quickly ask me in the next class. Join on time to ask the question. Don't worry. And wish you all a very happy new year in advance. Please give time for some relaxation also. And I hope the next year brings all the good news in your family. Thank you so much.